Competition time again, and here is a chance to win a brand new PS5. All you got to do is subscribe to On Track GP on YouTube.
Also follow us on Instagram at OnTrackGP. Make sure you like the competition post, it's pinned on Instagram as well.
You can win yourself this right now. What are you waiting for?
Can I enter? Or can I have a go?
No.
The officials got hold of the drawing showing how he was cheating, and because he didn't finish in the top 6, it wasn't obligatory for him to hand over the carburetor. And so then, long story short, it went to court. And
oh my God. Welcome back to On Track GP, specifically the On Track GP podcast. And once again, I've got Richard Bradley with me, professional driver, Le Mans winner. And look, I'm very, very excited about today's episode, Richard. This is one that I've been wanting to do basically since I knew that you were joining the team. And today's episode is all going to be about how do you become a professional driver. And you've done it. So,
yes.
So go on. How do you do it? Quick, answer that.
Blimey, mate. Yeah, we haven't got enough time.
Well, I want to learn about like the pyramid and karting and that kind of thing. But one thing I did want to quickly talk about, because we're recording this on Monday with the sort of breaking news that Ryan Reynolds is becoming a heavy investor in the F1 team Alpine. Where's that come from?
Yeah, that's massive news. You never know. We might end up seeing Wrexham's logo on the Alpine engine cover before you know it.
Yeah.
But I think that's fantastic news for Formula One to have someone like him come in. You know, it just re-emphasizes the new type of people who are getting into Formula One. I tell you what, it could be cool for though is maybe he'll try and do a series with the Alpine team, similar to what he's done with Wrexham, which has obviously gone down like a storm. So no, it's only positive that he's got involved. It's really good for everyone.
I mean, it would be fascinating because that sort of documentary about Alpine, the unprecedented access that he would get as an investor would be deeper and potentially a lot more access than Drive to Survive and Netflix, and with Netflix, and we've seen the success that's had and what that's brought to the sport. It could be huge for Alpine, bring them these new fans and that kind of thing as well.
Exactly, and I mean the thing is, Formula One teams, as everyone knows, they try and hide everything from everybody. So none of them were actually happy when Drive to Survive actually came in, and they openly say this. But obviously, if an investor owns a team and he says, "Well, I want them to see this," he'll have a lot more say. So if he does do something, I think we might get a documentary with a lot more access to behind the scenes. So no, I'm really excited for it. I think it's great news.
Well, look, it's super early days, but for me, the idea of that would be awesome because what he's done at Wrexham is out of this world. They're now into the football league. Alpine are already very successful. We call them probably the 5th team at the moment. Bit of investment and a bit of press can do so much. So watch this space, man. Could be great.
Exciting times.
Could be great. But look, let's get into today. How do you become a professional driver? I don't know really that much about it. I know in terms of I love F1. I've always loved F1, but you don't really think so much about how you see the clips of when they were kids and they were karting or their interviews when these guys, the classic being Charles Leclerc saying, "Oh, it's just an incident on the racetrack." The classic, you see those, but you don't think about actually the sacrifice and what happens and the day-to-day of what they have to go through. And you've done that. So I've got 1,000,001 questions. I'm trying to narrow them all down. Today, I came across a quote that I think might be a little bit of a recurring theme of today. And the quote was, and I don't know who said it initially, it might be one of those ones, it's a bit of an old wives' tale, but the quote was, "The best way to become a millionaire while racing is to start off as a billionaire." How much truth is that?
Yeah, that's probably true for 99.9% of people who get into motorsport.
Yeah, I mean, look, you have like the sort of wonder stories of like, probably most notably Lewis Hamilton, who kind of came from much more humble beginnings. I think Esteban Ocon was kind of in a similar situation there, and they're absolutely at the top of their game. Particularly Lewis, what he's done, 8 world championships, not 7, 8. Kidding,
Still bitter.
kidding. I'm kidding. So I understand that it starts with karting.
Yeah.
What is karting?
So karting, at a professional level is very, very different to what you do in terms of your corporate karting and, the stuff that we do with our mates for a laugh. The level is as high as you can possibly imagine, and it keeps on growing to the point now where they even have data loggers and they have data engineers. And thankfully, when I was karting, they didn't have that because I think it's completely over the top.
How old are you when you start karting?
I was 8 years old when I started karting, year 2000.
8 years old.
8 years old. Yeah, my parents let me do 60 miles an hour without any seatbelts.
Dude, that's wild to me. But I guess it makes sense because any elite sport you have to start young because you have to build. Well, am I going to get into confidence and that kind of thing as well? But to be 8, going, you say 60 miles an hour?
60 miles an hour, the cars did when I was 8. But to be perfectly honest with you, quite often people start practicing and when they're 5. You can only race when you're 8, but you can practice from as old as you like. So a lot of the guys I raced against have been doing 3 years practicing before they even race. So yeah, they were doing 60 miles an hour at 5 years old.
How do you know that you're good at 8? So how did you, at what point did it go, oh, I'm actually quite decent at this?
It's to be honest, the way I got into it came through my dad's work. My dad was a lawyer, and he was doing work for a client whose daughter raced, and she knew someone who looks after a lot of successful drivers. And so for my 8th birthday, Dad organised for me to have a go, and it was the first time I'd ever driven a kart. And Dad told me that after 10 minutes, the guy who was looking after me, a guy called Rob Goff, said to him that we've got someone pretty good on our hands here.
So
in 10 minutes,
there was a natural like, oh, he's got something about him.
Yeah.
That's so interesting because you were probably better than me at 8 than I am now.
And then it was a case after that. It was, then we effectively had to make the decision about how seriously we took it. And, at the beginning I was scared of overtaking and stuff like that until I got bribed for £1 in my 6th race. To try and overtake, and I just became a complete weapon after that.
Dad said, I'll give you £1 if you overtake someone.
That was it, mate. You could afford a lucky bag back then with £1,
That's amazing, mate.
And then after that, it just got more and more serious. And then in 2003, my last year in cadets, which is the karting category for 8 to 12-year-olds, we took it very, very seriously. I mean, every single weekend, non-stop. So
how does it work in terms of like, where do you get your kart and your tyres, and where do you find out where the races are and that kind of thing? Like, because it's how do you get from, oh, he's good, let's give this a go, to owning all the gear, the helmet even?
Yeah, so after that, we I did that test, and we borrowed a kart for that test, or rented or whatever, and then we decided to take it seriously. So the guy took us to a shop. So you just go to a manufacturer's workshop basically, and you say, hey, I want a kart, and then they show you what you need. But buying a kart, the equipment, I mean, racing equipment is not cheap at all. To even begin to start racing at a proper level, I would say if you want to take it seriously, you need a minimum investment of $3,000 just for the equipment. Just to get started. Just to get started.
Do you have to pay to enter races at
you have to pay to enter every single race. The entry fee back when I did it was probably 60 or 70 quid. So I can imagine now it's into the hundreds. And
that's just to turn up.
Just to turn up, yeah. The numbers are, the reality is, yes, we do have people such as Lewis Esteban, who came from very humble beginnings. But to even get started, you have to come from a relatively well-off background. And there's the odd exception, but I worked very, very hard to become a pro.
It's kind of crazy. I think we should get back into a little bit later about the idea of like how can we make this less elitist? How can we get more of the Lewis and Estebans into racing? But for now, let's carry on. So 8 to 12, you do the cadet racing. You get to 12 years old and you have to win a certain amount of races to carry on, or what happens?
Well, you have to. I mean, at the end of the day, at that point, it's still coming from your own pocket. No one raises sponsorship at that age because, to be perfectly honest, who's going to sponsor a kart? There's no return on the investment. The only people who get sponsorship then are people who have connections through business or something else like that.
Yeah.
So I was still funded by my family at that point. And 2003 became a very, very serious year for me. And we decided to take it seriously. And it became a very difficult year in a way as well because, I did the British Championships. I did various regional races, everything. I had a very successful year. I was Irish champion, Midland champion.
Wow.
But I was...
At the age of?
At the age of 12. But then I was competing for the British Championship. And, this was the first sign to me of the dark side of motorsport. Because there was a driver I was competing against who had bought an illegal carburetor from another competitor. And he was using that, and it was quite obvious that he had an advantage. And it was at the end of the series, it was him first in the championship by a point, me second. And there was a rule where if you finish in the top 6 in a race, they officials are allowed to check your engine, check your carburetors, check you're not cheating, basically. And this guy didn't finish in the top 6 in the last race. And long story short, the officials got hold of the drawing showing how he was cheating. And because he didn't finish in the top 6, it wasn't obligatory for him to hand over the carburetor. And so then, long story short, it went to court. And
Oh my God.
we weren't a party in this. It was only the championship who was a party in this, and the actual governing body who were behind it. The governing body was actually trying to do this for us with the championship. And yeah, 9 months later, they won the case. So I thought to myself, you know, I was 30 points ahead of, which is the equivalent to, I think, one race win ahead of the next place guy. And I was 11 years old, and you put all that work into it. And at that point, I was thinking, you know, this kind of sucks a lot. What do you do here?
That's at 11.
At 11 years
Emotionally,
old.
how do you deal with the fallout from something like that?
Well, I mean, it was good. The guy who was looking after me at the time, Rob Goff, and my dad were quite clever because they kept it away from me until I had another big win, and they just told me not to focus on it, and I didn't focus on it. And I won the next year. I won the Irish Kart Championship again, and that night when I won the championship was when they told me I lost the British Championship from the year before.
God.
But you know, it was dark. It was very, very dark because you thought to yourself, why do I even bother?
Yeah.
Or you can go, screw you, I'm going to just show that I'm better than that,
Yeah.
which is thankfully the decision I made. But it wasn't nice.
That's it's and it's almost a bit of a sign of things to come, right?
Yeah.
Within, as you're talking about the dark side of motorsport. So you finished the cadet racing. You're now 12, about to turn 13. What's the next step?
The next step is to graduate to what we call junior categories, basically. And this is where you start to get into the pyramid because everyone starts out in cadet, big grids, big numbers, see if they like it. And then the costs ramp up every category you go into. You have to practice more. You have to have better equipment. Obviously, as you get faster, the more loads, so the more you have to replace parts, etc. And so the pyramid gets smaller because people decide they're not going to make it or they don't want to take it seriously. So as the pyramid gets smaller though, all the good guys are still there, and there's more good guys because you then got the experienced good guys from before, so the level becomes even higher. And also the interesting thing with juniors is this is where you can start entering European competitions.
Okay, wow.
So this is where things start to get very, very difficult, very, very time consuming, very, very expensive. And yeah, you just do the same thing pretty much. You compete in as many championships as you can. In juniors, I did the European Championships a couple of times, did the Italian Championships, the French Championships, the Irish Championship, the English Championship.
And so at 13, when does junior finish?
You go from 12 to 16.
12 to 16, okay. So in that category, my first question about it is, do you race against people your ability or do you race against people your age?
You race against people in that age group.
Okay, so each year against 12-year-olds, then 13, then 14 and 15?
No. So you're all together, basically.
Oh, so there's no age
there's no age
separation.
defined. No, not
so at
at all.
12 years old, you're racing against a 16-year-old?
Correct.
What?
Which is a big difference, right?
Huge.
And obviously they've got all that experience racing in those. And then the other big thing is the karts get bigger in size. The power is a lot. They're a significantly bigger beast than they were in the cadet categories.
Are you a different species
Correct.
from 12 to 16, particularly as a guy?
Yeah.
You go through all of your changes in that time. And emotionally and mentally as well. So I can't believe that 16 and 12-year-olds are fighting each other.
You're looking at guys who are starting to get a beard and have got a deep voice and everything. You're there with your high-pitched voice like, oh, why did you hit me?
little Bradley here to race. Oh my God, Richard, that's crazy. I didn't know that. And I guess so my second question is, how quick are these cars going now in the junior category?
So top speed on some circuits, you'll be doing 90 miles an hour. But the thing is with karting, the top speed isn't what gets your attention. It's acceleration because they're geared for such short straights. So you'd probably do 0 to 60, or at least once they're moving, you'd probably get to 60 miles an hour in 4 seconds. You'll be doing some crazy speeds.
And potentially you're 12.
Yeah, potentially you're 12.
Even at 16, you're still a year away from getting your road license and you're going 20 miles an hour quicker than you're legally allowed to go in a road car. This is crazy to me.
And at this point as well, karting is a motorsport. It's supposed to be a non-contact sport, but I tell you, rubbing is racing in karting, and you take matters into your own hands sometimes. So it's a contact sport.
Is that potentially there we're getting into the dark side of motorsport again?
Not really. I mean, to be honest, you have to. It's just the rough and tumble of it, right? It's like when you have a football match and some teams kick out a bit more. It starts to get physical. But again, when you're at the top, though, you know, there's an amount of respect between everybody. We race very, very hard, but it's normally very fair.
And at this point as well, because you got into this, going back to the beginning, it was your dad's buddy whose daughter raced. Is there a separate category for guys and girls in the junior, or is everyone's all together?
We're all together, and throughout karting, we're all together. And to be honest, I've raced against some extremely quick, extremely talented female drivers. You know, they didn't make careers for one reason or another, but they were very, very talented.
That's really
I mean,
interesting.
you know, the girl who I started racing against in juniors, she ended up being on the front row for the World Championship when I was in seniors.
Wow.
So there's some seriously quick girls in karting.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because there are just less women in motorsport generally. Why is that?
Well, to be honest, when you get to juniors, it's the sort of stage where the carts are, when I did it, 135 kilos, are heavier now, 145 kilos. You've got no aids at all, no suspension, nothing. So that's the point where you actually have to start becoming fit, and you have to start becoming quite strong, especially in the upper body. So if you don't train and if you don't start getting a bit muscular and everything, then you're just not going to be able to compete. And so there's a bit of that, and then you know it's just something that makes it's not quite as attractive for female, but also there's a preconception that you know females can't get into it, but it's completely untrue. They come into it, and when you get to a top level, we look at when we see a helmet on the track, we don't care whether it's Godzilla or a female or anything. That helmet, it's a helmet, and we want to beat it, you know. But I tell you, there's some very, very fast women drivers.
Yeah, and I think that's something that the sport generally needs to look at a grassroots level, in the same way that football has done much better recently, particularly, you know, the success of the Lionesses last year, and that's had such a positive impact into women, into football. I really hope that motorsport can try and promote that to get young girls driving in the same way that so many young guys are driving. Okay, so you do 4 years in the junior category, then what happens?
Then it's the same thing, because this is where it starts to get really serious, is when you get into the senior level. And there's, you know, the senior level is basically the Formula One of karting. And this is where you actually have factory drivers like you do in other forms of motorsport, where they're paid by the manufacturer to race for that kart manufacturer, to market and sell karts, basically. And there's no age limit. So you get into seniors when you're 16, and you'll have people who, you know, you'll be racing against 30-year-olds. And
wow, again, it's a different, completely different mental and physical game between 16 and 30.
And you notice the difference in body language from the karts when you're racing against some of the adults.
Really?
And I tell you, when they decided they want to remove you from the race, they hit you a lot harder than the younger guys do.
Wow.
And, you know, but you're up against people, and this is where the level is insane. I mean, I was up against one driver who was world champion before I started karting in the category that I was competing against him in.
What?
And you're like, my word, you know.
Oh
so
my God.
and then also, apart from that, at that level, it expands outside of just the national and European circuit as well. You have to compete in the Asia Pacific Championship. You have to compete in the World Championships. And this is all whilst you're going to school, and you have to be testing all the time. I think in my last year of school, my attendance was, I think, 55% or something like that.
God.
Just because I had to be away testing and practicing constantly.
And again, this is another kind of reoccurring theme that comes up, is like the emotional strain of that in terms of traveling. There's got to be an element of tiredness knocking about, the stress also of your exams and your school, but also like emotionally, man, dealing with like friendships and relationships. What's that about? How's that work?
It's very, very tricky, because you do find it extremely hard to keep a social life, because you're literally having to practice every single weekend. And I always used to practice at a track in Lincolnshire. So I had to go from southeast London to Lincolnshire every weekend. And then if there was a race, we'd always have to leave on the Wednesday or the Thursday. And you'd get back late Sunday night, and then because you'd always have to go into school no matter where you'd been, because you were taking so much time off. But also that means that you miss all the social events with your mates. And I've got good mates, and I'm still, you know, really good friends with them today. And it was always easier to keep in touch with your mates. But there were times where you always got, you know, it's human nature to always want what you can't have. I remember one incident. There was a girl I liked at school. It was my first sort of secondary school crush.
Yeah.
And there was a party that weekend, and a really good mate of mine ended up, you know, getting with her, and they ended up in a relationship. And yeah, now you look back on it and you laugh. But we all know what we're like when we're 15 years old.
Mate.
You know, that makes a huge difference. And I was at that time, I was sleeping in a camper van at a circuit in Lincolnshire, and it was -5 degrees or something. And I was thinking, why the hell am I doing this? But as I said, it's first world problems now, but when you're that age, it makes a big difference. But then also,
Totally.
you know, my parents were very, very tough on me as well, which is a very good thing, because they said to me that, you know, I was in an unbelievably fortunate position where I was having this amount of money spent on me. And so they made my life, they basically when I was young, up until the age of 18, they gave me £10 a week pocket money. And they said, if you want any more money, then you have to go and get a job. So I did. I did a lot of waitering jobs and all of that stuff. But I got fired from every job because I kept having to go practicing. And I said to my mum, I said, look, I've clearly been working hard. I've clearly been trying. You know, it costs £6 for a travel card into London. You know, or can I, you know, you got to help me out. She said, yeah, you can help yourself out. You can stop racing whenever you want.
Yeah.
And, you know, you just, little things like that, again, it's first world problems, but I'm very grateful for it now.
Yeah, and I think that makes you check yourself a little bit and go, hold on a minute. As you said, I am in a fortunate position. I can't just, not everything is being given to me. And if I want to make this into my life, then these are the sacrifices I have to make. Really, really, really interesting. Talk to me about sponsors. When does that start happening? How does that happen?
It's incredibly difficult to find sponsorship in the UK, and it's almost a bit of a myth. 2008, when the financial crisis happened, had a huge effect, and motorsport hasn't really recovered from that. It used to be a lot easier to get sponsorship before that. But honestly, in karting and at the junior levels, 99.9% of sponsorship is through connections. You know,
oh man, that must be so hard.
It's very difficult for the English drivers because there's so many of us. You know, there's so many good English drivers. It's easier for drivers from other countries where motorsport's not such a big thing because it's very, very unique. But for English drivers, you know, there's a huge number coming through, and it's very difficult to justify it because a lot of people don't know the sport and the level of the sport, especially karting. And when they think of karting, you think of your casual indoor karting that we all do. We don't see the level where you've got, you know, the budgets for karting now have gone bonkers. To do proper karting now is like 300 grand a year to do it at a serious level.
Oh, give me a break.
Yeah, I know, right? It's gone.
Oh my
and that's to do it
God.
that's to do it as much as you can at the highest level you can do. You know, that's not to do it at a national level. That's to do the full world circuit.
Talking about elitist, man. Like,
I know,
who's
right?
got? And that's 300 a year that you've just got.
Yeah.
You've got to still. Oh man, that's crazy. I mean, it comes back to that quote: if you want to be a millionaire racer, start off as a billionaire.
Exactly.
So guys finding sponsorships, of course they're going to find more sponsorships if daddy's got a billionaire business and someone fancies a little bit of money on
Exactly.
on somebody that's karting.
And the problem is at that age as well is you haven't reached your plateau yet, so you keep improving on an almost vertical scale. So the more you do it, the more you test. I mean, there were kids I raced against who didn't end up making a career, but they literally wouldn't go to school. They would be homeschooled, and some of them wouldn't even have tutors, and they would just test 3-4 days a week. It was bonkers, utterly bonkers.
I mean, it's just wild to me. Yeah. Okay, so you're now in what was the name of it? The senior
ranks, yeah.
The senior ranks. How do I? Well, I've made it to the senior ranks. Joe Ashman's there. It's not very likely. How do I then get myself a seat in a Formula One car? What do I do?
So again, unfortunately, it does come down to funding, because then you have to go into cars, and cars is where the funding does start to get very, very serious. Especially the differences in karting is when you have a shunt, it doesn't cost that much, but when you have a crash in cars, it really gets your attention.
And the parts are more expensive, and
everything's carbon fiber, so it's unbelievably expensive.
Yeah.
You know, and so when I went into cars, and the only way I could go into cars was you know, don't get me wrong, I'm from a wealthy family, but there's only a certain limit that you can go to. And
it's not Big Daddy Stroll money.
Yeah, exactly. Which again is what sucks, because you know we don't deserve to we deserve to make it once we put the effort in, but we don't deserve the opportunity we had. You know, we did nothing to earn that right.
Really interesting.
And when the category to do in the UK, we just couldn't afford it. So my dad was able to get a job in Singapore, and the tax rate out there was significantly lower than the UK, and the cost to go racing there was significantly lower.
Interesting.
So we were able to go out, and I did the Asian Championship, which, you know, the economy there at that time was a lot better. And fortunately, I won the championship in my first year. And
wow.
I was also lucky because Red Bull, because the European market was struggling a bit, Red Bull sent over their drivers. So I was up against Sainz, I was up against Kvyat.
Oh man, that's cool.
And so, you know, and fortunately after that, you know, I won the championship, but then the offer I had to go back to Europe was a very, very good offer from a very good team who I won't name, but they wanted like £500,000, and it just wasn't possible.
You to pay them £500,000?
Pay them £500,000 to go to Formula 3, and that's cheap.
It's like a reverse transfer fee.
Exactly.
It's like you're paying it is pay to race, rather than pay to race. Sorry, be paid to race for. That's crazy.
And that's a deal. That's a properly good deal. And then fortunately I had the opportunity to to go to Japan, and that's where I ended up making a career and what expanded for me. But I literally basically got told one day, I got home from school and they said, yeah, do you want to, if you want to continue racing, you're going to have to move to Singapore. And that was in the days before there was 3G and before there was any apps and stuff like that. I was still plugging my laptop in with a cable and all that stuff. And
oh my God.
I moved to Singapore, and it was like, until the racing started, I just thought, well, what the hell am I doing here, sort of thing, because you couldn't meet anybody. I didn't have any mates there. I had no way to create something.
What a sacrifice that is. Like, and how old are you at this point, did you say?
I was 18.
Yeah, so it's technically an adult and stuff, but like you've still got so much self-exploration to do at that age. Like, that's real. Oh my God.
Also, the other thing is, everything I had except for driving cars was at home. It was at home in London. The culture I knew, my family, friends, everything. But for me, it was, I didn't even think about it. It was a non-issue. I was doing it.
Were you out there on your own?
No, my dad was out there.
Okay.
But my dad was traveling a lot from there, so I spent a lot of time on my own. But for me, it was a no-brainer. I was going to do it because I love racing that much.
So interesting. So now into the formula categories. How would I step from, let's say I've done well in the seniors or whatever, I've made a bit of a name for myself. How do I then go into the formula categories and then eventually to Formula One?
It's obviously,
money.
Yeah, it's money. It's money. I mean, unfortunately, it really is. I mean, to be honest, though, the good thing is once you get to cars, it's more relatable. So then there is more of a chance to get sponsorship. It's still unbelievably difficult, but there is then a chance to get sponsorship because you have something to sell. You can relate to it. There's more TV coverage. The events that you go to, etc., etc. Like for example, when I did the first year of cars, Formula BMW, which is the equivalent to Formula 4 now. My first race was supporting the Malaysian Grand Prix.
Wow.
So the only two race winners that weekend were myself and Sebastian Vettel. So, which was something you could quite easily sell that,
That's a good plaque to have. Me and Seb won at the weekend. Yeah, that's wicked.
So it's easier to sell. But then, it is about once you go from one category, you go to the next category. And as the categories get quicker, the numbers get more and more serious to the point where to get a seat in Formula 2 now, you're looking at 2.5 million. Yeah.
Oh my God. And that's you have to pay the team that money or
you have to pay the team that money, and that's before anything else. So that's before your expenses, which you have to pay. You have to pay your tickets to fly out there.
I can't get my head around it. It feels like they should be paying you to drive their car.
It does, and that's the it feels like it, but this is the business model, and obviously racing cars are very expensive. But that's before anything else. That's before you have a shunt, for example.
Oh my God.
There was some shunts in Formula 2. It's quite easy to have a crash in Formula 2 for the bill to be over 100,000. Quite easy.
Oh my God, I feel sick.
I mean, a front wing in Formula 2, a front wing assembly is 40,000 euros.
Oh my God. So is this where the sponsors come in, and that's where you need the support of sponsors
Correct.
to get you a seat?
And then when you are at that level, honestly, in Formula 2, you would probably say that 90% of the drivers are funded through sponsorship. How they got that sponsorship is different scenarios, but they all have big sponsorship behind them.
And then the difference between Formula 2 into Formula 1 is, where does that change?
So this is the thing that you have to then start looking at is your super license situation.
Okay.
Which was a system that they didn't have when I was driving, but there was some... They decided to bring it in because it was actually Verstappen who created this, because Verstappen had his first go in a Formula 1 car. I think he was 17 at Suzuka. And everyone went, what, are you serious? And to be honest, I raced in a category in Japan called Super Formula, which is Japan's version of F1, which Liam Lawson's competing in now. The guy who could be on the line for AlphaTauri. And they're probably 3-4 seconds off of F1. And I did that in my fourth year of cars. And that category, it was a huge step up. And it was something quite big. And I was 21 when I did that. Wow. So when I saw Max going into a Formula 1 car at 17, I thought, mate, this is too young. And Max is a special individual case. But when it gets like that, you start to create a precedent. And there are teams in Formula 1 who will accept paychecks to put drivers into cars for free practice or young driver tests.
Wow.
So they brought this rule in to actually stop that from happening. So the super license points now is kind of the Max Verstappen rule. So once you qualify for enough super license points, you then have to either wait for an opening to come on the Formula 1 grid, or you have to, you effectively, a lot of drivers will just buy their way in.
Oh my God.
But then, as I said, when you get to the Formula 1, then you can actually raise sponsorship commercially, because obviously it's such a big identity. But you're talking, I don't know, probably talking 10 million for a year, something like that. Yeah, some crazy numbers, but
more than some of them get paid.
Yeah, it's completely.
So
it's
potentially,
completely mental.
I mean, you know, they've all got.
But also the drivers who at that point, when you make commercial sponsorship, you take a cut from the sponsorship as your salary.
Okay.
So they are actually making money out of it.
Okay.
But yeah, it's mind-boggling numbers.
It's
mind-boggling.
Absolutely crazy. And I mean, look, you've done unbelievably in your career. And what I find so interesting about your career now is that it's so diverse in what you go and do. I mean, I can't believe that you're not jet lagged, because less than 12 hours ago you were like landing back from Japan. Like,
yeah.
it's crazy. You go and you help drivers out there, and you do a lot of testing at all the tracks. You've obviously won Le Mans. Like, it's amazing the diversity that you've been able to have in your career from all of this.
But the thing I was very, very lucky, because I had enough money to start and get me to a certain level, but we don't have the money of your other people. But I was fortunate because the way my family is, it's quite cosmopolitan in that we're not afraid of travel and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And we look at the world in a bigger picture, and we were able to pick out paths where there was opportunities to make a career. As I mentioned, we went to Asia. That was still only 2 years after the financial crisis. And obviously we all remember the European markets weren't there, but the Asian markets have started recovering. So I went to Asia when it was an emerging economy, and the manufacturers, i.e. Toyota basically, were able to support indirectly for me to be able to continue racing out there. So I didn't go the traditional route, but I didn't have the opportunity to. And that's how I was able to then build a career. So I was very, very lucky that my parents had that sort of vision and that scope. But the other thing is, for me, one thing I find quite sad is I feel like a lot of drivers now coming through the categories, a lot of them like to do it because it looks cool on Instagram, and they like to just be at certain races, certain events, and certain cars.
Monaco.
There you go, exactly. But I'm a complete motorsport junkie. I love motorsport. I will go watch races. I will drive anything I'm asked to. I will go to anything, and I really enjoy. I was in Japan helping a young driver, Jem Bollock-Bassi, who I've worked with in the past, helping him, and I love guiding drivers through the path, giving them my knowledge, because I know how difficult it is, and to help them through this minefield of politics and the other BS that comes in motorsport. Yeah. But anything to do with motorsport, I'm there straight away.
That's really, really interesting. All right, I'm going to take you back to when you're 8 years old. You're back in the cadet series, and I would personally feel terrified right now at the age I am, driving a tiny little cart flat out at like 60 or 90 miles an hour into a corner. I would feel terrified doing that now. At what age do you lose that fear? Do you never have that fear? Is it courage? Is it just, I love this, I'm just enjoying myself? When do you lose that fear? Because I think a lot of people out there would go, oh, I'd love to get in a Formula 1 car, but the realism of driving something, particularly a small little thing, let alone when you get into the crazy big quick F1 cars, when does that fear go or come, or do you never have it?
It's, to be honest, it's a bit different. You have fear when you first experience things, but I didn't have fear when I first started karting. The only time in karting I had fear was my first European race, because you hear all of these rumors how aggressive the Europeans are, and yeah, my first European race, they are extremely aggressive, to the extent that it's changed now because they've cooked up on this rule. But you used to overtake on the formation laps. Yeah, and my first race in Italy, I actually qualified. I think I qualified 10th or something like that. If you're in the midfield where they can't see you because there's this gaggle of carts, it's just war out there. And I started 10th, and I think I was supposed to start 10th. I think I started the race 24th because I just got completely bullied on the formation lap.
And you were like 12 or something?
Yeah, I was 12 or 13. And like, I came in and I got a complete rollicking from my mechanic and my coach and everything. And I just went, well, what do you mean? I was on the formation lap. They're all cheating. And they just went, well, they're not going to get a penalty. And I thought, oh, okay, well, I've got to do it. So I made a rule then. Every single race I did after that, if I didn't qualify in the top 10, then I was starting 2 rows ahead of where I was supposed to.
Oh, my God.
And it was I remember one quite funny story is I thought this was just a European mentality. And I did all my races in Italy at the beginning. Then I went and did a round of the French Championship. And the French are a lot more timid than the Italians.
Okay.
And so I was like, right, elbows out on the formation lap sort of thing. And then I remember there was this French driver, Alexandre Aroux. at the end of the race, oh my word, he was leading the charge, but I had 6 Frenchmen just coming up to me shouting in French, just like, and then trying to explain to the officials. I went, hey, I did nothing wrong, you know?
Oh my God. That's crazy. Right, I've got 2 questions for you. Because this has kind of been so fascinating for me in terms of like, I think one of the main things that's come across is like the amount of sacrifice and the amount of balls that you have to do this. So my 2 questions for you. Would you recommend somebody to do this? And if I was to make you 8 years old again, would you do it again?
Would I recommend someone? Absolutely not.
Really?
No way, not at all. Because the demographics changed significantly since I did it, because technology's evolved, and unfortunately when technology does evolve, the costs evolve, and the costs now are just completely insane compared to when I did it. If I had to get into it now, I just wouldn't be able to do it. I wouldn't be able to make a career from it, because everything's just spiraled out of control. Also, the chances of making something are minutely slim, and the sacrifice can be very detrimental and debilitating to the drivers involved, the family. So my advice would be no. And if I end up having kids, I would have to think very hard about whether I decide to put him or her into motorsport.
Yeah.
Would I do it again? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because
I just knew you were going to say it. I knew it, because that's who you are. I love that.
I mean, because the one thing which motorsport did, and the way that my parents were with me when I was growing up, is it made me grow up effectively and learn that I could look after myself. You know, I was flying to Japan when I was 15 years old on my own, and you know, I was flying basically all over Europe on my own from when I was 13 or so. And the independence and how that taught me to grow up and look after myself, the life skills I've gained from what I learned during motorsport are massive. And then, you know, the political side of it has given me a new steely determination, I would say, which has helped me in other aspects of life. And apart from that, I've met some amazing people. I've had the best time, and I'm in the fortunate position now where I'm paid to do what I love. I mean, what a fantastic position to be in. But, you know, it goes back to the point where I worked massively hard to get to where I'm at. But I was very fortunate that I came from the background that I came from, which I deserve to make the career I've made. I didn't deserve to have the opportunity that I had. You know, I just got lucky. And I think that it's taught me a new aspect on life, which I think is far bigger than just the motorsport side, which I'm eternally grateful for. And I've got some incredible stories and had some great memories. And yeah,
I'd love to actually go further into some stories that you've got, because we've had some chats off air that we might have to limit the language a little bit, but some of the things that you've been through. So I think that's something that we could look to in the future. But mate, what a way to wrap it up. Thank you so much for sharing all of your experiences. It's like completely fascinating to hear it, and I can't wait because I'm going to go karting with Richard at some point. That's going to be funny. That's going to be hilarious. I'm going to get absolutely like driven on. Oh, it'll be awful.
We'll have the cameras there, don't worry.
Yeah, and everyone will see how awful I am. But it'll be good fun, and you know, again, it'll be one of those things that shows the disparity between professional and some guy that just sort of like gets in the car and presses go and hopes for the best. So no, Richard, thank you so much, guys. Don't forget, we still do have the PS5 competition running. We're going to close that on the weekend of Silverstone. We'll drop a video like straight after this where you can see all the details of how you could win. But for now, thank you very much for watching or listening wherever you get your podcasts from. This is the On Track GP podcast, and we'll see you for the next one.
Competition time again, and here is a chance to win a brand new PS5. All you got to do is subscribe to On Track GP on YouTube.
Also follow us on Instagram at OnTrackGP. Make sure you like the competition post, it's pinned on Instagram as well.
You can win yourself this right now. What are you waiting for?
Can I enter, or can I have a go?
No.